Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce 2020 provincial election candidates debate for the riding of Coquitlam Burke Mountain. I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. My name is Stephanie Booth. I'm a Port Moody resident and I'm past chair for the Tri-City Chamber of Commerce, and I will be the moderator for today. Today we will be hearing from our candidates in the riding of Coquitlam Burke Mountain and their party platforms and their plans for our community and our province. If you're watching live and have questions, please post in the comments. Questions were pre-submitted and will be addressed additional questions if time permits. The rules and format for today. First, we'll quickly go over the format of tonight's debate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and their party's platform in an opening statement. After opening statements, our candidates will be asked a combination of questions. There's a number of questions that have been prepared by the Chamber of Commerce and submitted by the business community. We will be asking our candidates questions until the time is up here today. Based on random selection, one candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to the question before the floor is opened up to 1-minute rebuttals for a maximum of 6 minutes of the debate. Debate will be closed if we get off topic and we'll move on to the next question. To finish off, candidates will be given up to 2 minutes to make a closing statement at the end of the night. Candidates, are you ready? Our speaker order for tonight will be from my left to right, and we'll start off with Adam Bremner-Akins.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. I'm honored to be here tonight, and I'm honored to be on the stolen territory of the Coast Salish peoples. And I want to acknowledge that we are gathered on the Coquitlam People's territory, so thank you for letting us be here tonight. For the last 3 years, the Green minority government has pushed the NDP to consider both the people and the environment in their legislation. As we look into the future, many of us see COVID-19 at the forefront. While COVID-19 is the most pressing issue currently, we face multiple crises in terms of climate, housing, opiate, and mental health. A vote for BC Green Party candidate will ensure a fair and just transition away from fossil fuels, an immediate ban on fracking, and zero subsidies going to fossil fuel corporations, and resulting in a carbon-neutral BC by 2045. A focus on creating affordable and dignified housing that meets individuals' needs, and make comprehensive mental health care part of public health. We will stop old-growth logging and take back our forests from huge corporations and multinational companies. By making deliberate and strategic choices on how we navigate COVID-19, we can seize new opportunities from these challenges. Some of our solutions include ending the privatization of our long-term seniors care, benefiting long-term senior care homes by increasing staffing ratios, providing income for stay-at-home parents, assisting the government and businesses in creating flexible work arrangements, including working from home and optimal scheduling, implementing the principles of basic income into our societal safety net, starting with persons with disabilities and youth aging out of foster care. The Greens will prioritize our actions to address immediate challenges while at the same time ensuring our actions address long-term goals. The investments we make today will help build a stronger and more sustainable economy for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bremner-Akins. Now, Ms. Isaacs.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Chamber for putting on this debate this evening. I'm delighted to be here and connect with the people in Coquitlam Burke Mountain. For those who don't know me, I'm Joan Isaacs, and I'm running for re-election, and I'm happy to provide a little bit of background information about me. Before I was your MLA, my career began in the financial services industry, where I spent over 30 years helping people meet their financial goals. I worked with nonprofit and for-profit organizations, and as a business owner and consultant, I understand the day-to-day challenges of business owners. I am community-minded and passionate about youth and families, seniors, housing and homelessness, mental health, and restorative justice. I was elected in 2017 and held the position of Official Opposition Critic for Health, with a focus on seniors. During this time, I received a Seniors Advocate Award, which was only given out to 6 people in North America. So I'm very proud of the work that I did as seniors critic. In 2019, I was appointed the Assistant Deputy Speaker, which was also quite an honor. I introduced a private member's bill that would provide high-dose flu vaccination to seniors living in residential care homes, which would protect seniors from contracting the flu. My other portfolios were social development and poverty reduction, and recently, children and families. Everything and every one of us is connected in one way or another. And as a person who is passionate to help people and build better communities, I want to use my experience, not only from my business and my political side, but as a hockey mom with 2 sons, a mom who struggled to find daycare, and as a wife and business partner with my husband. Coquitlam has been our home for over 35 years. I love my community. We are so fortunate to have a diverse, welcoming, and inclusive city. It was an honor to represent you in the past, and I hope that I earn your vote again this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaacs. Mr. Donnelly?
Thank you, Stephanie. I'd like to thank the Tri-City Chambers for hosting tonight's event, Tri-City Community Television for broadcasting, and all of you for tuning in. I acknowledge we're on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. My name is Finn Donnelly. I'm your BC NDP candidate for Coquitlam Burke Mountain. Many know me as a former Member of Parliament, which I served for 10 years. I was also a Coquitlam City Councillor for 7 years. And prior to that, I was known for twice swimming the 1,400-kilometer length of the Fraser River to draw attention to its declining health and threats to salmon. I've lived in this community my entire life. I've seen firsthand the devastating impact COVID has had on people, families, schools, and businesses. John Horgan and the BC NDP have been working hard to keep our province safe during the pandemic. Now it's time for you to decide who you want to lead us through the recovery. I'm ready to join John and the NDP team to help ensure a strong, stable recovery that includes everyone. Our platform delivers by investing in people and the programs and services you need right now. Now is not the time to go backwards with Andrew Wilkinson's plan of service cuts and privatization, which you will pay for. We simply can't afford that. On October 24th, let's move forward together. Please vote Finn Donnelly, BC NDP, for Coquitlam Burke Mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Now we'll get to the debate questions. The first question, or the first round of debate, is on COVID-19. So what plans does your party have to both stimulate economic recovery, help tackle the significant amount of debt our province has now taken on through COVID-19 responses? And I'll start with Mr. Bremner-Aikens.
Thank you. Yes, COVID-19 has been devastating not only to our economy, but to families and individuals. And we have a plan for that. So the BC Greens believe we should start off first by defunding our fossil fuel industry. We spend billions of dollars a year funding what is destroying our planet. That needs to stop immediately. We need to transition that money into new grants for businesses. We're proposing a $300 million grant to help small businesses survive the winter in terms of paying 25% of their rental costs. We want to move our province so we can create sustainable jobs, and that includes investing $500 million into sustainable energy projects, and transitioning oil workers out of the oil industry and into jobs that they can be secure in for the future. We also need to look at why our economy has failed so horribly within the pandemic and look at how to build resilience within the economy so the next time we have a collapse like this, we do not have families who are struggling every day to get by, so people can feel secure and safe in their communities and can continue to live happily within Coquitlam. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bremner-Aikens. Ms. Isaacs, a 1-minute response.
Well, I think, is that on?
Yep.
Okay. There's no doubt that COVID has had a very impactful and negative effect on a lot of people. Families are suffering. They had to shift their lifestyle. Businesses are struggling. They had to shift their business model. Seniors had to shift their visiting. Children had to shift going from school. And we are now feeling the impact of some of those changes. As a society, we like to interact together. We haven't had that up until a few months ago when we started the recovery. But we have to look at what COVID has happened in our personal lives, in our business lives, and we have to think about how we're going to move forward. How are we going to move forward in a COVID environment and get the economy back up and running? Everything is dependent on the economy. Our social services programs, our education, our healthcare system. We have to get the economy going, and if we don't do that, we're going to fail all of our citizens.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaacs. Mr. Donnelly?
Thank you for the question. When COVID hit back in March of this year, the BC NDP immediately acted on expert advice of Dr. Bonnie Henry, BC's Chief Health Officer. We approved a $3.5 billion in the initial recovery for people and businesses. We made a $1.5 billion investment to fight COVID-19 this fall and winter by hiring 7,000 new healthcare staff, boosting testing capacity, and hiring 600 more contact tracers to help stop the outbreaks. Now you contrast this with the BC Liberals who underfunded healthcare and privatized cleaning services. Their cuts weakened seniors' care and forced people to work at multiple facilities. Care homes were understaffed, making some outbreaks worse. When the BC Liberals left office, 9 out of 10 seniors' homes weren't staffed adequately. The BC NDP is keeping people healthy and safe by investing in healthcare and focusing on recovery.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Aikens, would you like to rebuttal?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Isaacs, would you?
Yes, thank you. So actually in March, the legislature came together understanding some of the impacts that businesses and families were going to have under COVID. We all agreed together to allow a $5 billion package of aid to come to businesses and families. What ended up happening is $1.5 billion was actually earmarked for small businesses. That never flowed. The NDP did not flow that money. That money never came to small businesses. And as a result, they've been suffering. They haven't got the need and the help that they were supposed to get. And instead, we have an election happening, and Mr. Horgan and the NDP are announcing this $1.5 billion as part of their platform. Look, we have to get the economy going. Our platform is going to eliminate the PST to 0% for the next year and set it at 3% the year after. That is what's going to help customers keep more money in their pocket. It's going to be a 7% savings that people will realize right away. There's no paperwork to rebate. There's no need to apply for an application or a grant. This is going to be in people's pockets right away.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaacs. Mr. Donnelly?
Yes, what Joan and the BC Liberals have been saying about the $300 million that was earmarked for small business that has not been flowing is categorically untrue. It's just not true. The BC Cabinet has approved this money. Treasury Board has approved this money. It's sitting with the public service. It's being distributed. Now it's open to businesses to claim that money. There's no government that could come in and turn that around. The article in the Globe and Mail does not cite any specific sources. It's not true. This money is flowing. That's what the BC NDP has done, is taken time to consult with business, with labor, with communities, with First Nations, and took a bit of time to get that money right. We wanted to get the targets, whether it was the tourism sector, to ensure that those funds would help businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. On to the next question on housing and development. Approval for new commercial and housing projects can face extensive delays and take several years to achieve through the local government and the planning process. These delays add dramatically to the cost of a project, often putting the project itself at risk. How can the provincial government assist the local level of government to accelerate the planning and decision process? We'll start with Mrs. Isaacs.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Well, it's no doubt that we have to get our housing supply to a greater level. We have to provide a range of mixed housing that includes condos, townhouses, lane homes, and single dwellings. We have 50 to 60,000 people moving into the province every month, and they need a place to live. We also have a landscape with rivers, oceans, and mountains, so it's very difficult to move outwards. We always have to go up and densify. So we need to create a model where we have some mixed housing units. We need to work with municipalities to streamline the process, to create efficiencies, and to get construction workers to work. Getting the supply side up will help to look after both home ownership, and it'll also help on the rental units.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaacs. Mr. Donnelly?
I think we need to, the provincial government needs to work with municipalities, listen to what their concerns are, and help expedite the housing process, application process. What I've been hearing from constituents and people that are very concerned is about affordability in this election. The BC NDP is listening. The BC NDP has approved 25,000 affordable housing units in 3.5 years. That's more than the BC Liberals did in 16 years, and we have another 89,000 planned. There's 589 new affordable housing units that have been approved for the Tri-Cities, including a new and expanded Hoy Creek Co-op for 132 units, and a new affordable housing project on Ozeta Drive in Coquitlam. The speculation tax is starting to work. 11,000 condos are now being used for long-term rentals instead of sitting empty. We introduce a rent freeze to help renters that may be hardest hit by the pandemic. These are affordability measures that will help people in the Tri-Cities, in Coquitlam, Burke Mountain, and British Columbia. Absolutely, can we do more in terms of working with municipalities? That has to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Eakins?
Yes, thank you. I don't need to talk to constituents to know that our housing prices and rental prices are extremely overvalued. I myself was looking to get into the rental market, but realized I can't afford to live in the community because I don't have the financial resources. So I understand people are hurting and people cannot afford to live here, and that is a serious problem. So what we need to do first is establish a nonprofit organization to deal with co-op housing. This way we're not looking for companies to profit off housing, and we can keep rental prices lower. Also, we're looking to close loopholes within the speculation tax that the NDP left open for foreign buyers to jack up prices, and we need to make sure that we close loopholes that stop satellite families from coming to British Columbia and buying our houses and preventing people who may not be able to afford the increased prices by new families coming in to live here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bremner-Eakins. Ms. Isaacs, would you like to rebuttal?
Thank you. Actually, the NDP broke their promise of making housing more affordable. It has always come down to supply and demand. The NDP promised to build 114,000 affordable homes, but they've only actually built 2,963 units. And at the current rate, it is going to take about 100 years for them to complete. And out of that 2,963 so-called affordable housing units, only 5% are affordable rental housing. Of the projects that are in the works, 50% of those units in affordable housing are behind schedule. The supply didn't go up, and the demand is still there.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaac. Mr. Donnelly?
The BC NDP has approved 25,000 affordable housing units in 3.5 years. For 16 years, the BC Liberals sat on their hands and watched the housing market skyrocket. They did nothing to address the housing crisis, that they put wealthy speculators and developers ahead of people for 16 years. In 2001, when the BC Liberals came to power, they canceled every single affordable housing project the NDP approved. I was proud to stand with John Horgan and Selina Robinson, our housing minister, 2 weeks ago in front of Coma Lake United Church project to talk about how we are going to move forward with affordable housing projects right here in the Tri-Cities.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Eakins, would you like to rebuttal?
Yes, thank you. I think one of the important things we're seeing here in Coquitlam is the development of skyscrapers. And while it may seem currently that it is a good way to densify and decrease prices, we have only seen the approval of expensive housing. We see luxury housing, large apartments that are not suitable for people who cannot afford to live the life of the wealthy. And so instead of building these large luxurious skyscrapers, we need to focus our resources on low-income housing and middle-income housing and supporting people who spend more than 30% of their income on rent. Because people cannot afford, especially with the pandemic and the economic recession we are in, we cannot afford to be building big luxurious towers or be lacking on co-op housing or low-income housing. It's not working for Coquitlam, it's not working for BC, and we need to get our act together and begin to build co-op housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bremner-Aikens. We'll now move on to the next question on small business and the economy. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the federal government has provided specific financial income and support programs to assist those who have suddenly lost all or a large portion of their income due to the disruptive effects of the economic shutdown and contraction. If your party forms government, are there any specific changes that you would lobby the federal government to change or restructure to better assist small businesses that have seen their revenues drop substantially? And we'll start this with Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Stephanie. The BC NDP moved quickly to provide supports for small business. I mentioned earlier, Cabinet and Treasury Board approved $300 million, which is currently with the public service being delivered to small businesses. BC's recovery will come from helping workers and small businesses who are the backbone of our economy. The BC NDP has also introduced a hiring credit worth 15% of any increase to payroll and 100% PST rebate on investment in machinery and equipment. We will work with the federal government to ensure that businesses get the wage subsidies that they need to get them through the pandemic. We will also continue to listen, to work with the Chamber to hear the needs and the concerns of how the provincial government can access federal funds to things like assist with the tourism, with the innovation sector, with film. With a number of small businesses that have concerns, we will be that voice to access the federal government to be the conduit and work with the federal government to ensure that funds flow and that we address the concerns of the small business community.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Aikens.
Thank you. Yes, small businesses are extremely important to our economy, not only because they provide the places families go out to dinner or where you buy local jerseys for the soccer team, but they're an important backbone in resiliency and to our economy. So we need to protect them at all costs, and this goes for we believe in creating a $300 million fund to pay rent for small businesses who cannot afford to. That if they qualify for that, the government themselves would cover 25% of that cost, and that should come from the federal government because they need to be supporting our small businesses more. They have ignored our small business community, and they need to be heard. Secondly, we need to retool the provincial grant to focus on supporting small tourism operators. And this is important because tourism is one of the hardest hit sectors within our economy currently, not only because of COVID-19 restrictions, but they have not seen income since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and there is no way for them to safely reopen at the capacities previously they were able to work at. We need to also work so we do not lose not-for-profit tourism. They are also being hit quite hard, and these are important. These are the people who protect our oceans. These are the people who protect our coastlines and our forests through exposing people to our society.
Thank you, Mr. Bremner-Aikens. Mrs. Isaac?
Thank you, Stephanie. So the federal government can help in a lot of different ways, but I think what we need most is infrastructure dollars. These are projects that we can be shovel-ready. These are projects that are needed, either transportation, hospitals, schools, other public infrastructure. They cost a fortune, and this is where our federal tax dollars can come back to help our province in rebuilding the province. But in terms of small businesses, the NDP added 23 new taxes last year. That is not the answer. Small businesses represent 98% of all businesses, and many are operating at 40 to 60% below capacity level. They are really hurting. They are really hurting. And I know some in Coquitlam here, as you probably do as well, that will have to make some tough decisions and decide how much longer they can hang on because there has been no money flowing to them. Many businesses had to let their employees go, and their businesses are suffering. 1/4 of the businesses say they may go bankrupt.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaacs. Mr. Donnelly, would you like to rebuttal?
Yes, the BCNDP eliminated MSP for people and businesses. We reduced hydro rates. We eliminated bridge tolls. We also reduced ICBC rates. These are steps that will help small businesses in our community by allowing people to have more money in their pockets to purchase the products and the services that they need. The BC Liberals are promising a PST cut that doesn't help people with their rent, groceries, insurance, or childcare. Our plan puts money in people's pockets directly to assist them to get the things that they need.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Akins, would you like to rebuttal?
Yes, thank you. Yes, small businesses are suffering, and we have seen a lack of action from either two parties. If the BC-NDP really wanted to help small businesses, they wouldn't have collapsed our government. That is where we can get funds to small businesses. That's where we can decrease regulations. That's where we can improve the ability for small businesses to function. But yet here we are in an election that is not helping small businesses, not helping people, and not helping our province move forward out of this recession and out of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Isaacs?
Thank you. Well, the NDP may have said that they've eliminated the MSP, but they simply renamed it the EHT, which is the Employer's Health Tax. This is absolutely crippling companies and businesses. We hear from businesses all the time of how difficult it is to manage the payments for the EHT as well as the administrative burden. Some people have actually had to hire a bookkeeper to look after the accounting, which added on another expense. Right here in Coquitlam, we have Urban Gate, who had 80 employees. He's now down to 12 employees because of the employer health tax. Gabby and Jules had to lay off their staff. Every one of these businesses had to increase their prices, which meant it was downloaded to you. So life didn't get more affordable. It actually got more unaffordable. People have lost their jobs. The small business owners feel terrible. They know there's a family and a paycheck behind that person that they have to lay off. And it is a direct result of the EHT and all the accumulation of taxes.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next question regarding health. A recent Angus Reid survey found that health care was a #1 issue for voters 55 and over in BC. While COVID-19 has been front and center, the province is still facing issues with the opioid crisis, mental health in the homeless population, and more. What health investments is your party prioritizing and why? And we'll start with Mr. Bremner-Akins.
Yes, we believe immediately we should incorporate mental health care into the MSRP, because we see mental health care is not only extremely important regularly, but with COVID, we have seen an increase in mental health cases. We have seen an increase in depression, anxiety, all as a result of social isolation. And this is one of the most important things we believe in investing in. We also need to increase investments so we can hire more nurses for our hospitals and for our long-term care homes. And we need to incorporate long-term care into our public health system so we stop the profit-taking of companies caring for our elders. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Isaacs?
Thank you for the question. There's no doubt our health system is vital to everything that we do. We rely on it. It's one of the best healthcare systems in the world. We're very fortunate to have it. It does have stresses. It does need some overhauling. It does need some modernization. But on the point of mental health and the situation that COVID has accelerated some of the anxiety and the stress that people were already experiencing, it really has made a difference with isolation, without being able to interact with other people. We've seen it from young ages of school children who weren't able to go out and play with their friends. We've seen it at senior care, where seniors have been left on their own in isolation without a family member to visit. When they finally did get a visit, it was just through a window. Aunts and uncles, grandmas and grandparents couldn't hug their grandchildren. It's had a huge ramification and impact on us all around. I don't think we're really going to see the results of that impact until later on.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaacs. Mr. Donnelly.
The BC NDP is expanding Eagle Ridge Hospital and opening an urgent and primary care centre in the Tri-Cities. We slashed wait times for MRIs and have significantly increased the number of doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers. We've hired hundreds of new doctors and nurses through our primary care networks. Under the BC Liberals, wait lists for surgeries and tests grew, and they privatized cleaning services in hospitals. They left senior care homes understaffed. Andrew Wilkinson sold land off in Surrey meant for the Cloverdale Hospital. The BC Liberals cannot be trusted to improve health care. In terms of mental health, John Horgan created the first dedicated mental health care and addictions ministry in BC's history, unique in Canada to deal with mental health care and addictions. We're doubling youth treatment beds and adding more adult treatment beds. Riverview Lands should be a big part of the solution.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Akins, would you like to rebuttal?
Yes, thank you. People can't afford care in BC right now, especially with the recession we're in. People cannot afford to be spending $100 per session on mental health care. People cannot afford to seek other care that would not be accessible to them through our provincial government systems. And so we need to expand that. We need to increase funding to our hospitals so we can update and modernize them, especially in communities that are rural. And even here in Coquitlam, we have a lack of medical services in our immediate area. And so we need to improve that with more local clinics for people to go to if they have smaller injuries, preventing them needing to go to the hospital, racking up costs there. And we also need to start investing more in our healthcare workers in our hospitals. The NDP has underfunded healthcare workers' salaries, and they have provided them with not enough PPE equipment. They have left them to fend for themselves in hospitals. And this is not acceptable, especially when we're in a pandemic. We need to be funding our hospitals more. We need to be raising the wages of our healthcare workers, and we need to be supporting them with everything the government can. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to rebuttal? Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. Absolutely right. We need more care. We need to modernize our system. We can move to a virtual care, which we have done during COVID. We can expand that virtual care program. We can do an online prescription renewal program so that you don't have to go to the doctor or see a physician every time you need to renew a prescription that you've had on an ongoing basis. We need to increase our urgent and primary care facilities. You have all the care within one system, all in one door. It's absolutely convenient, and it works for a single source to get all your health care under one roof.
Thank you. Mr. Donnelly?
I just want to correct Adam. I think he may have been thinking about the BC Liberals who have underfunded health care. We have actually increased funding for care homes. We have put more funding towards homes that require PPE, and we have stopped contract flipping, which happened under the Liberals. So we have taken measures to ensure safety, to fund our healthcare workers, those folks that we cheer for at 7 o'clock every night that did an amazing job through and still are working tirelessly. We need to continue to support them, and that's what you'll get with an NDP government, is a focus on improvement and funding with healthcare.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Would you like the last 30 seconds?
Yes, thank you. Sure, the NDP may have funded a small amount more, but it's not nearly enough what we need to have good hospitals and a strong healthcare system. We need not only a plan to increase funding to our hospital system, but a plan to increase funding to healthcare workers who are struggling to survive. They cannot survive on their salaries right now. They are working long hours on dangerous jobs, and they need to be compensated for that. As well as we need to have a plan to prevent visits to hospitals. We need to engage in preventative care so people don't end up in our hospitals. Thank you.
Thank you. On to the next question regarding our schools. With the second wave upon us in BC, what is your government's plan for our children in the public school system across British Columbia, especially if cases continue to trend in the wrong direction or outbreaks are linked to our schools in our province? Mrs. Isaacs.
Thank you. Well, education is one of the most important things that we can provide for our children. It's an absolute priority, and that we have seen that children have missed out on some of that social interaction with their friends. We are always following the guidelines of Dr. Bonnie Henry. We've followed that for the back-to-school opening plans. But as an MLA, I received 400, actually over 400 emails and phone calls from worried parents and teachers around the back-to-school program, back-to-school plan. The government waited way too long to reveal what those plans were, and then downloaded all the plans to the individual school districts. Many parents were concerned about their special need children, family members who may have had compromised health issues, and children going back and forth from cohort to cohort and bringing home contagious viral infection. I raised my concerns and the concerns of parents with School District 43. I responded to everyone who expressed a concern, and I have worked really hard to make sure that parents knew that they had an advocate in me to bring their concerns about the back-to-school plan forward, and I did just that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Donnelly?
The BC NDP is committed to funding a new high school and middle school on Burke Mountain. Over the past 3.5 years, we provided funding to ensure 4,200 new teachers were hired and 102 new schools will be built across the province. One of those will be the 430-seat Sheffield Partington Elementary School on Burke Mountain. We made big investments in new playgrounds so parents don't have to fundraise for them anymore. We negotiated a new collective agreement with teachers. When the BC Liberals were in power, they battled teachers all the way to the Supreme Court. For many years, we needed schools in this riding. The BC Liberals failed to complete the building of a single school on Burke Mountain. In fact, when Andrew Wilkinson sat around the cabinet table, he sold off land designated for schools on Burke Mountain to a well-connected developer at a discount, making it more expensive to build schools there now.
Mr. Bremner?
Yes, we must increase funding to our school districts. We need to create smaller class sizes and provide funding to increase access to EAs, virtual learning, and more resources for teachers and principals. The BC NDP tried to strip teachers' rights away after they won a 12-year lawsuit against the government for decreased class sizes. Immediately after, this is horrible for British Columbians and our students. The smaller class sizes provide teachers with the ability to teach their students better, give them more attention, and allows for students to engage in better learning. I will protect teachers, and I will fight for you and your rights and for our children's education, because it is the most important aspect in our society. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Isaacs?
Thank you. There's only one school up on Burke Mountain, and it's Smiling Creek, and that was funded and built by the BC Liberals. The Burke Mountain Middle High School is another infrastructure project that will benefit parents and students living on Burke Mountain. In 2017, the NDP promised that they would fast-track schools. It was an election promise that they did not keep. For 3 years, I asked Rob Fleming, where is the school? And every time he gave me another excuse, and he has done nothing, in fact, to move it forward. In fact, the NDP created a new step by asking for a concept plan a year after everything had already been submitted by the school district, that a joint venture program was approved by the city and the school district. All requirements were complete. The NDP asked for another step in the process. And I do want to respond to the land that Mr. Donnelly is speaking about. The NDP and their candidates have been misleading people about the land on Burke Mountain. This land was sold in 2014, and it was sold through a fair and open process. Every single real estate transaction, whether it's your house, a commercial property, or whether it's a parcel of land.
Thank you.
I'd like to respond to that.
Well,
it's a little rich coming from the BC Liberals that they waited for years to build. They could have built the high school and the middle school, but they did nothing. They waited, and in fact, the school was completed under the BC NDP's term. So the funding may have started early, but they didn't complete a single school. So it's a little rich to be hearing about how the BC Liberals want to see schools now on Burke Mountain. The BC NDP will get the job done. I stood with the Premier 2 weeks ago. We announced that there will be a middle school and a high school on Burke Mountain, and I, if elected, will see that commitment.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mrs. Isaacs?
Okay, well, first of all, Smiling Creek was a school that was done under the BC Liberals. You didn't fast track that in any way, and you didn't fast track any other school. And as Mr. Finn Donnelly realizes, there is a school district process that has to be completed, and there are certain steps that have to be done. The problem is, in 2017, the NDP promised to fast track the process. They didn't, and that school is still not built. We will get that school built because we put it in our infrastructure, our $8 billion infrastructure project funding, and we will have that school built.
Thank you very much. And just to let you know, you've also answered a question from the general public as well, so covered it off there as well. So for our next question, it will be on climate change and the environment. With debates surrounding pipelines, our exporting of raw materials internationally from BC's west coast and projects such as the Site C Dam, what is your party's stance on energy projects, and what do you see as the appropriate policy response to climate change? And we'll start with Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you. Climate change is one of the biggest challenges facing humanity. We are experiencing increasing wildfires, flooding, severe weather events, and a loss of biodiversity. In cooperation with Dr. Weaver and the BC Green Party, we developed Clean BC, the most ambitious climate action plan on the continent. We passed the Climate Change Accountability Act to legally require government accountability on emission reduction targets. We aim to be net carbon neutral by 2050. The plan includes rebates for electric vehicles and home efficiency upgrades, $105 million for incentives for industry to move to cleaner operations, and $106 million to help schools, hospitals, and universities reduce energy consumption. I just want to finish with a personal story. I mentioned in the opening that I swam the Fraser River. I swam it twice to draw attention to these issues. This is a personal commitment of mine that I feel motivated. It's what got me into office. I see these challenges and I want to be a part of the solution. I'm very excited to join John Horgan and the BC NDP to move these solutions into reality. And I think that's when something that I can absolutely bring to the BC NDP, a passion, a commitment, experience, and knowledge, and able to get the job done.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Aikens?
Yes, neither of the two parties have any plan for climate change that will work. We have seen this in Site C, which not only has destroyed the environment around where it's building, but its sole purpose to be built is to provide electricity for LNG and fracking. We need to immediately ban fracking in our environments so that we can continue to preserve our forests. We need to be providing zero fossil fuel subsidies to massive mega corporations who are going around the world and drilling for crude or LNG and destroying our environments. My future is at stake with climate change, and that is one of the main reasons I have entered into politics, is to try and protect my future so that it is not lost to the greed of the other parties and their dedication to funding fossil fuels. It needs to stop immediately. That is why I was the first student to start climate strikes within our district. That is why I went down with 125,000 other people to protest the government's inaction on climate change. And this is why we are seeing around the world youth getting involved in politics, because we're scared for our futures.
Thank you, Mr. Bremner-Aikens. Mrs. Isaacs?
Thank you. We are very fortunate that in our province we have an abundance of natural resources, and we need to make sure that we get those resources to local and global markets in an environmentally safe way. We always need to balance the benefits of economic development with the environment. The BC Liberals will make sure that BC has competitive tax policies to attract companies and have them invest here. The PST to zero will be attractive, and so will be the small business cut to small businesses. Andrew's plan will ensure that our regulations and permitting processes are working efficiently, again, to balance the need of the resources, the jobs that they create, and protecting the environment. We've been a leader in renewable energy, and we need to continue to review and evaluate best practices.
Thank you. Mr. Donnelly?
Our commitment to climate change is, I've just outlined our plan, parts of our plan. Our plan is on the website that all can view. I'm surprised that Adam would say that we don't have a plan. We worked on it together with the BC Greens. I also want to comment that we will protect clean water in British Columbia, creating a watershed security fund to conserve, protect, and restore watersheds for public good. The BC NDP will expand BC's popular provincial parks by creating new campgrounds, trails, and protected areas while increasing funding to improve infrastructure in the park ecosystems. We will invest in new strategies aimed at protecting wildlife and habitat. We will implement the recommendations in the Old Growth Strategic Review to protect more old growth forests in addition to the 353,000 hectares protected in September. While in power, the BC Liberals cut funding for environmental conservation, protection, and restoration. They handed control of environmental oversight to industry, and they cut funding to service to our BC park system.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Aikens?
Thank you. Clean BC began as a great bill, but when we collaborated with the NDP, they took the most important parts out of it and left it as a shell of its former self. The NDP's climate plan includes funding fossil fuels to the tune of over $6 billion a year of taxpayer money. It includes fracking and destroying our forests and cutting down our old growth forests, which are some of the rarest forests in the world, and we are lucky to have even the few we have left in BC. What we need to do is sit down and actually come up with a climate strategy that doesn't allow for fossil fuel productions in our province, that doesn't allow for fossil fuels to be funded by taxpayer money, that doesn't allow for the destruction of our environment for profit. We have resources, but we need to leave them be. We need sustainable forestry management. We need to stop cutting down old growths, and we cannot take any more fossil fuels out of the ground. And so I ask both parties, are you willing to commit to banning fossil fuel subsidies, taxpayer money that is funding the destruction of our planet? And will you protect all old growth forests, not just sections of it?
Thank you very much. Now we're on to our next question, which is resource projects. Safe, well-regulated, and responsible natural resource development is a defining feature of BC's economy. Would your party implement a process with clear, certain timelines and practical deliverables in order to advance permitting and approvals for resource development and export infrastructure that ensure BC is seen as a jurisdiction open for business? And we'll start with Mr. Bremner-Aikens.
Thank you. It is important that we sustainably manage our resources. So this includes using secondary grown forests as sustainable management forests so that we can still use our lumber in BC, and we take our lumber and we use it and produce it into things that want to be bought, that whether that be 2x4s or plywood. We need to manage our forests, not like we are doing now, so that we can protect water, protect Indigenous rights, and protect the environment while still protecting our forestry workers who are a big part of our economy, especially in the interior. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Isaacs.
Thank you. So we have a thriving natural resource industry, and that is absolutely vital to sustaining our healthcare, our education, and our other public services. And BC's industries must be globally competitive in order to succeed. That's going to include a fair tax system, as well as permitting, timing on permitting for mines and other types of permits. We're committed to fast-tracking those and doing a complete review and overhaul of the permit processing. In terms of forestry, the BC Liberals introduced a 5-point recovery plan for the forest industry, and John Horgan said no. The forest industry does need to modernize, and it has been hit with mill closures and curtailments. But there was a rural dividend fund that was established to help those rural communities in uncertain times. But the NDP canceled the funding and left these natural resource-dependent communities without this valuable resource that communities need to stay afloat. We have to have that fund reestablished to support those communities.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaacs. Mr. Donnelly?
We need proper oversight, environmental oversight in our resource sector. That's been a problem under the BC Liberals for 16 years. And that's why the world had issues with many of our products that were being sold. The BC Liberals handed control of environmental oversight to industry. We need to change that to work with the industry, work with communities, work with First Nations, and work with business to have proper oversight and ensure that we can add value to our products. In terms of forestry, we should be looking at community forests and cooperative models that benefit communities, that keep value in those communities, that work with First Nations. I am the son of my father was I grew up in the forest industry. My dad was a mill worker. He worked at Macmillan Bloedel. I've seen the changes over time, and we need to help our forest industry recover.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Eakins, would you like to respond?
Thank you. It is important. While I sit here and say we need to shut down our fossil fuel industry, I need to provide a plan for workers who are in that industry. And so we do have that. We need to invest $500 million in transitioning our oil workers out of their current jobs and training them for modern day skills. I personally have family who works within the oil industry and the forestry industry, and I understand that they're concerned about the job loss under our green policy. But a green economy under the BC Greens includes oil workers. It is not their fault. It is the companies who are polluting the world, and we need to support them and their families to a clean transition that is equitable for everybody within the province.
Thank you. Mrs. Isaacs?
Thank you. So I think if Mr. Donnelly and his NDP party were concerned about community resource-based communities, they wouldn't have canceled the Rural Dividend Fund, because those communities absolutely depend on it. But look, industries and sectors are modernizing and they're upgrading all the time. But we need to modernize the regulations for investment in BC to ensure sustainable and efficient land use decisions by ensuring more timely approvals from the Environmental Assessment Office, while at the same time ensuring a high level of environmental protection.
Thank you very much. So on to our next question, and this is a public question, and it's regarding Strata Insurance. Strata Insurance rates have increased dramatically over the past year. What does your party plan to do to address this issue? We'll start with Mrs. Isaacs.
Thank you, Stephanie. Well, we have seen an increase in condo insurance here in Coquitlam, and I've talked to a number of different towers and a number of different Strata Council members and listened to their concerns. It has been something that's had a little bit of a lifespan for 2 years already. It's already been in the works for some time. Some of our condo neighbors here have had an increase in their monthly strata fees. The insurance has gone up 400%. The deductibles have skyrocketed as well. It's impacting seniors who are living on a fixed income and young families who just managed to get into housing and have to budget for every single penny. This is a huge problem. It's not going away. The NDP has done absolutely nothing to help strata owners with the rising costs. They could have dropped the sales tax on insurance premiums, but they chose not to.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaacs. Mr. Donnelly?
Just a note on the tax on insurance premiums, that would amount to approximately $20 per unit. So we need a substantial change to address this problem. I also have spoken with strata managers, and I spoke to my own strata president. He's very concerned about this issue. I committed to him that we will work together to solve this problem. The BC NDP begun addressing the problem by closing loopholes and improving regulations to create more transparency. We now require transparency on broker commissions in excess of 20%. We're working with all parties to develop solutions. This is a problem that has happened over years, and it will take some collective effort to make this, to find the solutions. Even the BC Liberals say there's no silver bullet. and that their own proposals are, quote, not going to solve the problem in and of itself. That was Todd Stone in February of 2020. And I think that's right.
Thank you. Mr. Bremner-Aikens?
Yes, it is extremely important that we bring down the rising cost of strata insurance, not only because our current rental prices are already too high for some families to afford, but it is too high for what it offers. So what we would need to do is convene a task force to immediately give us strategies in reducing the cost of strata. This task force should include insurance brokers, insurers, and strata owners, because we need to include everybody in this plan, and we need to include some of the smartest people we can to make sure that we find the best solutions for British Columbians in lowering the costs of living.
Thank you. Mrs. Isaacs?
Thank you. Well, we did debate the strata insurance bill and the bill that Todd Stone brought forward and the bill that the NDP brought forward. And it's the NDP bill that that ended up to be the weakest bill ever. In fact, there were 16 sections that were debated section by section. 14 of the 16 sections that are supposed to help strata owners with reduced cost of their premiums and their deductibles and to put in some preventative measures are actually going to be done behind closed doors in cabinet. They're cabinet decisions. They're not decisions that would be debated in an open and transparent way. So we need open transparency. We need disclosure. I agree. We need to have a committee to look at this and really dig down into best practices, best rates, all the elements. It's a very complicated issue, but we have to look at all the elements and bring them all together and make sure that we can do something for this, because this is a huge problem.
Thank you. Mr. Donnelly?
I agree with Adam that I think we absolutely need a task force to look at this, to bring people together to get the best minds to solve this problem. And I think we should work across the aisle. All parties should be working together on this. I think this is a nonpartisan issue, and it's something that's going to require a collective effort to solve the problem. We need to work together on this issue that affects everyone. It affects everyone living in essentially condos and strata units. And that's requires a collective effort. And I think that's something where parties can come together, work together, and make the solutions and create the solutions needed.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Okay. So let's take us now to homelessness. Homelessness affects us all, whether it be in business community or the larger Tri-Cities community. What will your party do to address this growing issue? And we'll start with Mr. Donnelly.
Since coming to power, the BC NDP has housed thousands of people in 3,800 supportive units in 30 BC communities. We ended tent cities in Oppenheimer Park, Maple Ridge, and Wally, and introduced modular homes to house people. Our investments stopped homelessness from increasing for the first time in years, according to the homeless count. If elected, we will build 10 new complex care homes with more on-site psychiatric and nursing care to support those who need higher level of care to get well and succeed in housing. Under the BC Liberals, homelessness tripled. Tent cities grew in communities across the province. Housing prices skyrocketed 30% in Metro Vancouver between 2014 and 2017, while Andrew Wilkinson sat at the table and watched it happen.
Thank you. Mr. Bremner-Aikens?
What we need to do is immediately tackle the issue of homelessness and where it comes from. And first off, that would be tackling our social safety net. It is not catching everybody who is falling through it, and that needs to change. So we need to invest in young adults moving out of government care, as they are the most likely. We need to invest in our low-income communities. We need to invest in our First Nations communities so that we don't have homelessness in the first place. But what we also have to do is transition homeless people from the streets into housing and either get them mental health help or addiction support or a job so that they can begin to have stability in their life and make money. And so the strategies we can use is we can begin to build housing that will house homeless people, will give them the strategies and techniques that they need to get jobs. We need to provide funding so that they will be able to thrive within our society and rejoin our society once again, because we've pushed them out and we need to bring them back in because nobody wants to live on the street.
Thank you. Mrs. Isaacs?
Thank you. Well, homelessness is a growing issue, and it's a growing issue that affects cities all across the province. One of the things that we have to do, I think, is collectively better identify who's homeless and why, and then provide the proper supports. People are homeless because they've lost their job, or they've been evicted, or they don't have any money to pay rent. They need housing. There are people that are homeless because they suffer from addictions and mental health. They need to be supported differently, and they need housing, and they need treatment. We have to treat the root cause of the problem and prevent the harm. There are also people that have suffered an illness or an injury and have a brain injury. They have become homeless, and their needs are entirely different. We can't put people who have different needs and require different supports all under the same roof. There needs to be a proper assessment and more specific supports if we're going to change the face of homelessness. Simply moving an encampment that was shut down by a public safety order into hotels and mixing this group of different homeless people with addictions, mental health problems into a family neighborhood did not work. It made the situation worse.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaac. Mr. Donnelly?
We need to treat homelessness as a health issue, not as a criminal matter. We also need to work with municipalities, nonprofit organizations, and churches who have been working hard to solve this problem and to help those who need that hand. The BC NDP is committed to put people at the center of what we do to recover our economy and our recover from COVID. That's what a John Horgan government will do. It'll put people first. It'll work with those that need the services, and will provide the services, whether it's housing, affordable housing, healthcare, mental health. These are the services that an NDP government will deliver.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Eakins?
Thank you. 80% of homeless people in a recent study were found to have a traumatic brain injury. This is a serious problem because not only can traumatic brain injuries lead to mental illnesses, but it shows that there is one specific area where we have failed significantly. In the past, both the BC Liberals and the NDP have ignored homelessness. This is a problem. We need to treat homeless people with dignity because they deserve it. They are people, they are not objects or just a group of people to be talked about in policy discussions. Homeless people are not dangerous to neighborhoods. I don't know where that comes from, but it's just not true. Homeless people are our community members. They could be your neighbor or your family, someone who just lost their job and could not find the financial resources to pay rent that month. These homeless people deserve to be talked about as people, not as politics. And we need to start respecting homeless people more and providing them support, love, and housing so that they can get back on their feet and back into our community, making our lives better.
Thank you. Mrs. Isaacs, do you want the last 40 seconds?
40 seconds?
40 seconds.
Thank you. So the NDP was not committed to the community, the residents, or the businesses in those neighborhoods. In fact, there was no consultation. There was no public awareness. Nobody knew that that was happening. People just showed up in the hotels. This exact same thing happened in Coquitlam. The city of Coquitlam wasn't notified, the councillors weren't notified, the fire department wasn't notified, and the police department were not notified. And crime has increased significantly in family neighborhoods. We're seeing more vandalism, open drug use, discarded needles, and people who don't feel safe in their own neighborhoods because of the aggressive behavior and street disorder. We're going to invest $58 million to fight that crime, hire 200 more police officers and 100 more psychiatric social nurses and social workers to establish mobile crisis response teams like the CAR 40 program that's been very successful.
Thank you very much. So we have time for one more question. This is a public question. Many young people are having to take on massive debt to attend university, college, or trade school. What is your party doing to support young people with education, debt, and other skills training issues? And we'll start this one off with Adam.
Yes, thank you. I myself am a political science student currently at SFU, and I understand universities are costing more and more every day. Transportation to and from universities, while not happening now because of COVID, are only increasing, not to mention the increases in rental pricing. So one of the things we immediately need to do is to make universities, public universities and colleges, tuition free. We've seen this work in multiple countries around the world. This not only benefits students, but it benefits our economy because it may cost us tens of thousands, $15,000 to put someone through university, $20,000 depending on what they're going in for. But that cost to society is reflected positively at the end of the day when people go and they get jobs that require high education standards. They bring more businesses to BC, they bring higher paying jobs, and they are able to invest more into our communities.
Thank you. Mrs. Isaacs?
Thank you. So two of the issues that students face is basically their cash flow. How are they going to spend money on their everyday living? And how big does that debt get when they're going to school for multiple years? So part of that is the cost of living. So we have committed to student housing to allow students to go to school close to where they are doing their studies, cheaper, more friendly housing that is more affordable for students while they're going to school, and that's the main thing, is the cash flow and increasing the debt.
Thank you. Mr. Donnelly?
The BC NDP eliminated interest on student loans. We restored tuition-free adult basic education and English language learning, helping people who want to upgrade and pursue their dreams. We eliminated tuition for former youth in care, enabling more than 1,100 young people to attend post-secondary. We expanded the $4,000 BC Access Grant so that more low and middle income students can pay for tuition and textbooks. We added thousands of new seats for apprenticeships. When the BC Liberals were in power, tuition fees tripled and student debt dramatically increased. Andrew Wilkinson said students would get, quote, carried away when we eliminated interest on BC student loans. Clearly, the Liberals oppose this. We're focused on setting students up for success when they graduate, not leaving them with crippling debt. Students deserve an affordable, quality education that opens up opportunity for them. That's what you'll get with a John Horgan BC NDP government.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Bremner-Aikens?
Thank you. Students are already facing extremely high rent rates, extremely high insurance through ICBC, the increasing costs of living in Vancouver and the Metro Vancouver area, and we are only seeing increasing prices within our community. This is why it's so important that we not only make universities and colleges tuition free, but we get rid of pre-existing student debt. So students are not weighed down for 10, 20, even 30 years with student debt, and so that they can go and begin to build wealth, either through their first home purchase, or through buying an apartment, or through investing their money into something that can allow them and their families to prosper in the future.
Thank you. Anything further? Mr. Donnelly?
I'll just add one thing that I think Adam brings up a good point, that it's not just education that's important in students in their affordability in their lives. We provided a rent freeze to help with housing, the housing costs. As I mentioned earlier, we're focused on more affordable housing. We need to bring in more affordable housing options so that students have affordable places to live as they go to school. That's a focus and a commitment of the BC NDP.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the formal debate portion of this evening. And now I'm going to go to closing statements. So each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. And based on the predetermined order, we're just going to start with Mr. Donnelly first.
Thank you, Stephanie. The question in this election is, who do you trust to work for you and your family to tackle the tough challenges that lay ahead? I've lived in my entire life in our community. I've got the experience to be your voice in the legislature. Now is not the time to go backwards with Andrew Wilkinson's plan of service cuts and privatization. John Horgan and the BC NDP are moving in the right direction, working for you. Our platform builds on progress made over the last 3.5 years to improve health care, create jobs and opportunities, and make life more affordable. Together, we can move BC forward for everyone. On October 24th, I ask you vote for Finn Donnelly to become the next MLA for Coquitlam Burke Mountain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mrs. Isaacs?
Thank you. I would like to thank the Tri-Cities Chamber for hosting the debate this evening, and thank the other candidates for their participation. There's only one reason why we're here tonight, and one reason only. John Horgan has called an unnecessary election in the middle of a pandemic for self-serving and political reasons. Despite his calling for fixed election dates to assure that governments could not take advantage of high polls and would have to fulfill their mandate, he's called an election anyway. John Horgan and the NDP did not win this last election. They formed government because they made an agreement with the Green Party. They sang the praises of a coalition government back in 2017, and now they say it won't work, even though the Green Party has fulfilled their end of the bargain. Despite promising the Green Party, promising the Lieutenant Governor, and promising the people of British Columbia that there would be a stable and collaborative government for the next 4 years, John Horgan and the NDP have decided that they should be a majority government and have ripped up the contract and agreement with the Green Party. Instead of working on an economic recovery plan, he's been plotting for his re-election. The BC Liberals have put forward a platform that will get us back to prosperity and address economic recovery with bold action. I'm Joan Isaacs. I've worked very hard to represent the people of Coquitlam Burke Mountain, and I promise that I will continue to advocate and be that voice in Victoria if I am re-elected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Isaacs. Mr. Bremner-Aikens.
Thank you. Times are tough right now. Not only do we face a global pandemic, but we're in the midst of a COVID crisis. BC Greens are ready to create a stronger economy, a greener society, and a more equitable province. I am here today fighting for my future, the future of your kids, and the future of our planet. People are suffering, trying to make ends meet, and trying to get through this pandemic together. I will do my best to ensure affordable housing, to clean up our environment, and to commit to things the other parties won't. Banning fracking, banning fossil fuel subsidies, and shifting billions of dollars towards people instead of corporations. Now is the time to make government work for British Columbians. That only happens through electing a BC Green government. And so on October 24th, I want to thank you for your vote. If you are voting for me now or decide at the ballot box, or if you vote not for me. It's important that we work in a democracy that has multiple options, and I'm glad to represent the people of Coquitlam Burke Mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Bremner-Atkins. And thank you to all of our candidates. It takes great courage to run for office and work to serve your community. And to the viewers tonight, make sure that you get out and vote on October 24th. If you need more information, please visit www.elections.bc.ca to find the nearest voting location to you. Thank you and have a great night.